An expo and a talk on web machine learning with TensorFlow.js, which should be really exciting. So please do kind of mark your calendars for that, which is in a month's time. Next week on Tuesday, we have got Edinburgh.js, where we will be talking about Astro Framework and Astro Islands. And we have got someone from Netlify coming talking about kind of how to get pixels on screens across the internet, so kind of serverless cloud and all that kind of thing. So if you're interested and you want to take a trip through to Edinburgh, please do come through for that. I'm sure it'll be very exciting. So we've got two speakers for you tonight, first of which I think will be very interesting because time zones and calendars and all that stuff always blows my mind and messes up any project. So Mozafar, take it away. Cheers.
Hi, hello everyone. It's nice to be here. I used to do a lot of this before the pandemic, and it's been a while now, so it's nice to be back to meetups. My name is Mozafar. I am a software developer. Work-wise, since the pandemic again, I am between two projects. Mostly one of them is called Nyala.dev. It's a small software house/agency with a childhood friend. We build things like How Diverse Is. It's a site that uses ML to analyze diversity based on photos for people in the companies, or Barmaja for teaching programming in Arabic and Amharic. So yeah, projects that are not very, like our take on tech for good, really, tech for the marginalized, and things also for back home, which is Sudan, which I wanted to just take half a minute to talk about it because a group of us, like Sudanese who are abroad, who are lucky enough to be abroad, there is a conflict there since a year ago. It's not on the news or anything. It's the biggest displacement in the world, 10 million people, including all immediate family, really. And I'd like, to just, because we saw in tech in the last years that people are breaking out of this, like keeping politics out of tech, because politics sometimes include lives. So I hope that that extends to places like Sudan and so on. So if you like the talk, even if you don't like the talk, if you don't like me, it will be great if you can just tweet or repost or do anything about Sudan, because in the last week it got worse, as in the internet and the communication were stopped there. So it's a very grim situation that's not on the news at all. But luckily, I don't only work for Nyala, otherwise I'll be starving. I also work for a great project called DHIS2. DHIS2 is an open source health information management system. It's actually the largest in the world. It's run by University of Oslo as a global digital good product, it's called, as a non-profit. It's the main health information system used by 52 out of 54 countries in Africa, all over Southern Asia and in South America. So it has a global reach, and the story of this talk is basically about something that I built last year as in that context. So because of the customer, not really a customer in a non-profit, but because the end user are in the global south and so on, the challenges that we face are different from like the stereotypical tech, and I think they are quite interesting. Like our apps have to be offline first because you work in places that they don't have internet. You have everything that we do has to be offline first. You have to care about bandwidth a bit much more, and you have to do things like what I'm going to talk about. So sometime like beginning of last year, I got a user story that would read something like this. As a user, I want to be able to enter a date so that I can save and analyze data based on these dates. It's pretty straightforward. But if you've been dealing with dates, you know that they're never straightforward. There's so many things that are complicated. It's probably, if you're doing software for business logic, it's probably one of the most complicated things that you could deal with. So you have time zones, you have leap years, date math, when you have maybe to calculate age from a birth year or date. You have to, how to make that DST save, like daylight saving save. You have partial dates when you don't care about the year, but it's just a day, a month, like a birthday or a holiday or something like that. How you identify periods, if you are doing financial year rather than a year, you know, from April to April, formatting dates, localizing them, internationalization, things like that. So dates, they are not straightforward. There is a lot to do with this. There always this, my experience, like always this one unit test that starts firing when New Year's come and you don't know why, because someone didn't mock the year or some absurd things like that. But from a front-end perspective, it can be pretty much straightforward from my experience. You know, you use a library like Luxon or Moment in the old days, and you deal with that kind of logic. You need somewhere to enter a date, date picker. You start with this input type equal date, because this is the standard way from browser. It's widely supported. It's because it's standard, it's accessible. It's the way to start from simple solution, right? Then at some point, someone will come and be like, okay, this is not good because every browser looks different. So we want a user experience that's consistent. So you go for a UI component. There are lots of libraries. I mean, if there are libraries, always no need to reinvent it. React date picker, but any UI component library will probably have some sort of a date picker that you can use. In our case, there was a twist, though, in the user requirement, which is not as a user you want to be able to enter a date. It's to enter a date in multiple calendrical systems. And that got me into a rabbit hole of things. Yeah, you can scan the QR code or go to this to see like the final component that we built. It's a calendar. Yeah, it's a UI calendar, but it supports multiple calendars, really. That's the difference. So the starting point is just like what are calendrical systems in the first place. If you are like in the context here, in actually most of the world, what we are used to is the Gregorian calendar. So we have a year that's 12 months, January to December, 30, 31 days, 28, 29 when it's leap years. That's a system that we are, most of the world is used to. But me personally, like growing up in Sudan, we also have like, there is the Islamic calendar. So, you know, people fast in Ramadan, and people here always like in Europe will be like, how come you don't know when Ramadan ends? And we don't know because it's not a solar calendar, it's a lunar calendar. It follows the moon. So every month can be 28, 29 days, and it changes. So that's another category of calendar. So I had an idea that, you know, there are other ways of doing calendars in the world because of that. But I didn't know the extent of it, that there are so many ways of solving the same problem. The problem is basically that the year is 365 days, 0.2564 something. And then what do you do with this 0.25? You put it in a leap year, yeah, like you put it in February. But yeah, there are other ways of dealing with that, and communities and world has been dealing with it since forever, because of like the cultural dominance and like colonization and a lot of things. The whole world shifted to Gregorian, and it's easier to do that. But in Ethiopia, for example, which is very telling because Ethiopia is the only country in Africa that wasn't colonized, and it uses a totally different calendar system, which has 13 months, and this is the title of the talk. So in Ethiopian calendar, they solved the problem of this 0.25 with having 12 months that are 30, all of them 30, and then a 13th month that's 5 days or 6 days, depending on if it's a leap year or not. And it's a deterministic system. Deterministic as in you can do conversions out of it. You always know day falls in what year, and it's actually easier to think about in so many ways. But then we also had to support Nepali calendar. Nepali calendar is lunisolar. It uses both the moon and the solar system, and it's non-deterministic. You don't know. You cannot calculate. It's almost like a lookup table, really, to do that, to know where it day falls. And yeah, that just got me into this. Yeah, there was the technical part of building that component, but then there was just learning about calendars, and I got really fascinated about that. So like for the first 3-4 months of last year, I was talking about nothing except calendars. I was a very annoying person, just like that's the only topic I talk about. But yeah, so we built the components that, yeah, maybe hopefully you scanned it and you saw it, but if not, maybe I can also get it on the screen. So it's, I don't think I can do that, so hopefully you have it open. But it's a calendar that, yeah, support multiple, I can, yeah. So you have the Ethiopian calendar, Nepali, you can use other calendars, but you can also localize them. So these are all Gregorian, but showing the month name in Arabic or different languages. The same for the numbers and everything. So everything is internationalized and also using different calendar systems. And to do that, the main we had in our system in DHIS 2, we used to be able to support this in the front end because there was a jQuery UI plugin that did this. So it had support for the calendars we needed at least. But as we started moving to React and like fancier framework and so on, we had to move out of that. So that got like the evolution of that was, we had a developer who got all the business logic that's in jQuery UI and put it in a library. It's called World Calendars, and it has an implementation of all these calendars. Like I said, some of them are easy, some of them are harder, some of them are deterministic, some are not, but we had that. But at some point, during that process, an API started becoming, we heard about this temporal API. I don't know, have you, who heard about it, temporal API? So yeah, that's good. Then at least you didn't waste your time. At least you will know about that. Everything before was just anecdotes, but at least now you can know about temporal API. But there are like the other fascinating side of this. I think it was just getting to learn about reading about these standards. For example, the I-18N, and just going to the standards pages and reading them, which is always felt like something very inaccessible. Like you go learn there, and it's very hard to read through them. And it's true. It's very hard to read like the main standard. It's very technical. It's meant for implementers like Google Chrome or someone like that. But the conversations that are like, if you go to the GitHub repo and you see the README and the conversation around it they're very accessible. The people who are doing this work are, my experience, are very approachable when I had questions. So that was another good thing. So I-18N, maybe I'll just, this part, I'll just mirror my screen, is easier. So the standards I'm talking about, so we have I-18N. So in the browser, you can say new internationalization, and then you can say something like date format, and you can format. I can format this today date to French just using that like this. I can, if I'm interested only in the week day, I could also get the name in French. I can do French Canada. I can do anything really here. Like you can say English US, English GB, any. You can format the dates, get the parts of it. So things that we needed before, we needed moment or something like that, and you will be maintaining a list of locales with translation and so on, you can do them with this, with the internationalization standard. So that makes it possible for that component to, like do the localization part without having to maintain any local files and translations. And related to that, something that I didn't know it exists, but that all of these locales and everything, they are maintained in this Unicode CLDR. So all the translation that we see in most any computer applications, really, they come from this central repo, and it has translations for things like dates and anything you think of. Like if I put English here, and it will, okay, it will have all of these things. I got into this. This is a bit tangential, but I got into it because I had a question for the people maintaining that about how they, how do computers deals with Islamic months? How do you know Ramadan is 28 days. It turned out to be 29 days. How does your calendar updates? And they told me, yeah, all of computer devices, mostly, they just get this data from this project, the CLDR, like a repository for anything that has to do with internationalization. So yeah, the computer might calculate that today is 29 of Ramadan, but it turned out it's actually the next month. It will be updated here, and then it will be pulled by all devices and then updated and used. Yeah. So yeah, this internationalization is great for things like that, and then it uses all this Unicode repository of data for translation and so on. But the main new standard here that made doing this work actually possible is temporal, and temporal is going to be the new date API in the browser. So if you dealt with date, again, in JavaScript, you'll know they are a pain. The API, it has a lot of issues. It's very weird to add, subtract to it. It doesn't make sense. It mutates the object, so it's hard to test. It's hard to reason about. But the new one is basically called temporal. So that will be like a window.temporal. It will be available. It's now in stage 3 proposal, but it's the standard. There are 4 stages for something to be a standard, and then all browser will implement it as part of JavaScript. And it's pending like a technicality for it to be approved, but it is stable. So temporal will be you can do temporal.now, and you can get plain date, but you can have plain date ISO, which will get you the ISO date, but you can also do things like temporal, like this, as I'm getting now, instead of plain date ISO, you can say plain date and a calendar, Ethiopic, for example. And you see this is, so the other standard I forgot to talk about is ISO 8601, which is, it's this format, standard format for exchanging dates. So you have like year, dash month, dash day. And there is an extension to it now for time zone. And there is also this last bit, which is the crucial bit for this work, is that it also supports the calendar. So you can you can define the date in different calendars. So here, when I say temporal dot, I can get the year, and this is the year in Ethiopic calendar is 2016 now, which is true. Yeah, it's like 8 years. How many years behind us? Yeah, 8 years. Yeah, because of this, 6 days lumpiness, they add up in every. Yeah. If I put the Islamic calendar, there is we are 1445. Islamic has a couple. That's something also I didn't know when I asked about how do you deal with this changing. There are variation of it. So Islamic civil is actually a way of making an Islamic calendar that is that is deterministic, so it follows a calculation, but there is also another variation. So Raqs, I think that's it. That's regional something Saudi Arabia that's like follows the calendar in Saudi Arabia. So there are a couple of these. But yeah, this makes it so that's one part of it, of temporal, is just dealing with dates, and you can do things like that, but it also has a zone date time where you can deal with dates with a time zone. So you can say this is time, this is a date in this time zone, and then do calculation based on it that are that can deal with time zones and convert from time zone to another time zone. So this is this I would say it's a great addition to JavaScript. And like I said, like going into the GitHub repos and reading the conversations and so on was interesting by itself. And one of the conversations there were about when they were about how to decide on the API. The API, so they have a big discussion about how all the languages deal with that. So how Java deals with something like that, how Rust does that, and then taking the best bits out of all of these languages. And it's modeled around the library in Java, Yoda. So they thought like this had like the best implementation. But yeah, it's just you go through discussions and it's very fascinating, I would say, just that how much details they go into for making decisions around that. So yeah, so this talk, if you forget everything, it's just like this is the most important part, that there is a new API being added to the browser called Temporal that will make us, get rid of looks on moment and do things in a browser native way. One of the bits in the discussion that were interesting also, they were talking about, Java doesn't have, Java or all the main languages, they don't have, calendars as part of it. But they said because JavaScript is used like, the others are used in the enterprise, in like their context is, okay, it's enough to do just ISO or a Gregorian calendar. But if you are targeting end users, these are the people who would need their own calendars when they surfing the web or something. So that's why they decided to include calendars in Temporal. So yeah, these are the standards that make this possible, I would say. And let me get back to. Okay, maybe. So yeah, and we had like from this work in a way to push. To push Temporal to its limit, I would say. It's just which was a nice thing to do early on. So while it's still being developed as a standard and so on. So we had one of the calendars we had to support is Nepali calendar. And that's not part of the Unicode repositories. Also, you had to add the custom calendars. It allows you to do that. But also Nepali doesn't come as a locale that's supported by browsers, so we had to provide our own translations. There is a standard that should be coming that would allow you to load, like basically augment the locales that are in the browser with something that's custom, but that's not there yet. So that means that you cannot take a date that's in Nepali custom calendar and say .to locale string, but you can do that with other dates in the other native calendars. So we had like to do, and we created a wrapper around it. This is the component design part, like how we built it. We have, there is the UI component, which is part of our UI library. But then we created a calendar about, created a wrapper around Temporal. First of all, because it's not final standard, so we just wanted to abstract, the changes, like if something change, which is unlikely, but also to be able to abstract these things about Nepali calendar and so on. So we have this library. Everything I'm talking about is open source, so you could check it, even the Jira tickets and the discussions and everything. So yeah, there is this wrapper, multi-calendar dates, that is consumed by the UI component. It supports right to left, which is another thing that if you don't know about, is good to look at. It's like, it does that, and we have an initiative to support that for everything. Instead of using physical properties in CSS, you use logical properties. So instead of saying left or right, there is now equivalent that's like start and end, basically. And that makes it anything that you build for the web that can support, can switch direction without issues. So that's if you did like Arabic sites in the past, that was a pain to do things like this. But now with this, yeah, logical properties it makes it much easier. So it uses that. For accessibility, there is we started with the base, so you can navigate it through with a keyboard, and that's just using semantic HTML, like using a table. There was a discussion whether semantically, is this a table or a list of days, really? And there are talks about it, and just by using a table, because it's tabular by nature, it has headers for weeks and so on, and for days, and rows for weeks, and using buttons for things that you click because they are buttons, then that already gives you somewhere like with like somewhere reasonable with accessibility. But there is a lot to do more than that around making date picker accessible, and we are working on improving that. So there is here a part of, like, you can read this online. I'll have it in the notes for the talk. Just all the things that you need to do to make a calendar accessible. And then there are UX improvements that are coming. So this works as in it's a date picker, but there were so many technical details that you miss things that are obvious in hindsight. But it was a lot of work to get it working in the first place. But when users are doing it, it looks nice and pretty, but they are entering dates in forms all day. They want an efficient way, and actually that one didn't allow entering the date manually. You have to pick from a calendar. So there are UX improvements about enabling manual entry, navigating years quicker, formatting things, and so on. We also experimented with something very interesting. We had a hackathon, and we used Kotlin multi-platform. So because we now have code in the front end that understand dates, but you have then the back end, and that's for us, that's in Java. And using Kotlin multi-platform, we could do the core code for calculating calendars. We write it in Kotlin, and then we export a JavaScript library and JVM code for it. So you have the same code in both sides. So yeah, the interesting part, I think, about all of this is that you can see it all online. When I've done these talks in the past, they were always the issue that I work for a commercial company and I cannot show what I am doing. But for this one, everything, literally, even the arguments that we have between us will be like published online. And that's, yeah, the takeaways. Yeah, talk about Sudan. Temporal API is coming to a browser near you, so keep an eye. And DHIS too, especially if you are, I think, if you're a junior developer, it's a very good place to look for code, contribute code. The mandatory, we have jobs. we just finished hiring 4 front-end developers. So, but we are looking for a Java backend developer with focus on performance. And it's a very interesting challenge because I said the context of what we do is very different from most of tech. So it's a very interesting role. But also for junior developer, there is this website. It's maintained by GitHub for good. It's called For Good First Issue, and gathers all the issues that you can work on from different projects like DHIS, so projects like that are non-profit and open source. And you will find a lot of things you could pick up and just work on while you're like building your CV, you know, in that period between uni or boot camp and getting your first job where everyone wants experience and you don't know how to get it. This could be a good place to look for things to work on, and also to just exposure to not just the coding side, just Jira tickets and developers and communications and everything like that. And that's it. I think that's it.
Questions?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Thank you. That's great. One of the things I wanted to pick up on in your talk was that I think we're quite privileged as web developers in that because the web is worldwide, we get to, like, isn't just, you know, dealing with the narrow things. Sometimes you get to do a deep dive on something that's super interesting about the way the world works. And I think quite often, I don't know if anybody else has been in the situation where you're working with a client or something like, cool, well, so this is how it works. But there's that little 5% of cases or something like that that you know, is just, totally different. So happy to take some questions now. Does anybody have any questions about the talk, about the project at all? At the back there. If you can speak into the microphones, the live stream can hear you. Cheers.
Sure, thanks. How did you find working with the temporal API polyfill? Was it pretty straightforward? Is it stable now? Can you use it in production is what I'm asking.
So they have a disclaimer that it's not production ready because technically it is not, I guess, until it's approved. But the issue that's pending, so things when are in stage 3, they don't change APIs or so. So it's very stable. And the one issue that are making them wait for it to be approved finally, it's a technicality about how to, that bit about ISO 8601, how to serialize the calendar bit. And that's just because it's part of a different process. It takes time to approve it and so on. But it's very stable. I'd say like it's not going to change by this stage. I think browsers are already starting to do an implementation behind a flag. So yeah, it's a good time to pick it up.
Because there's another which is supposed to be super fast, lightweight one, but
the standard one, yeah, the one
Fantastic.
that they link it from the website.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Cool. Well, what we'll do is we'll post your slides somewhere. We've got a Discord channel that we post the slides into, and I'll put it in the Meetup group. We're just going to take a very short break now, just so people can get, you know, a can of beer or whatever. But first, I'd like to say Greg is a recruiter in the room. He's right at the back there, waving his hand. If you want a job, recruiters are welcome along to these events on the condition that if they ever recruit anyone, they pay for some beer and pizza for us. We do have some very kind sponsors for our events. So Barclays Eagle Labs shouted the pizza for this one, and Glasgow City Council have given us some money for drinks and live streaming and so on. So thank you to them. There's also a suggestions board that Victoria's brought along with her. So she's lugged it here. So as thanks for lugging that there, I think you should put some suggestions for topics you want to see at future events, or if you want to volunteer to talk, stick it up in the little whiteboard there, and we'll take those down and take your suggestions on board for future events. If you want to go and just grab a quick refreshment and come back here, be as quick as you can, 3 or 4 minutes. Thank you. Okay. Hello. Thank you for being quick. That was like much quicker than any other meetup I've ever run. Cool. So the second speaker tonight is going to talk about accessibility, and the speaker is Doro. Take it away.
Oh, no, you don't have to. Yeah, hello. I'm Doro, and I'm going to talk today about juggling with hedgehogs, and in particular about the social model of disability and code. First, a little bit about me, because I guess that's how people start. I'm Doro. I'm from Germany. I moved to the UK in 2013. I first studied psychology and worked in mental health, and then decided to change careers. And then, yeah, did CodeClan and graduated in 2022. Thank you. CodeClan it was amazing. Yeah, I've now been a developer for 1 year. I'm an associate developer with ScottLogic. One kind of small disclaimer, I'm not an accessibility expert yet, by any means. If anybody here is, and if I get something wrong, then please do let me know, because I want to learn. But I hope that won't happen. So we'll see. Let's get started. First of all, does anybody here like fantasy or sci-fi or things about like parallel universes or alternate realities? Yes, we have a lot of nerds in here. Excellent. Because I would like to talk about a slightly different universe than ours. And it's about public transport. It's an alternate universe where instead of paying with your phone, where you have your ticket on your phone and you show that to the bus driver, instead of doing that, you need to have a hedgehog with you. Right. And if you think that's weird, then you're right. But I would like to let you know that in Brighton, there's a lemon bus where you can pay with a lemon. So the parallel universe in where this is the case is not actually as far removed from ours as maybe you thought. So this is the hedgehog fair, and it works very well. In this universe, everybody has very thick skin. So thick, in fact, that the spikes don't even register. A lot of people juggle with hedgehogs all the time. Hedgehogs are cheap to produce and easy to handle, so this works really, really well, except for that around 1 in 5 people have skin like you and I and find handling hedgehogs on public transport impossible or very difficult. So we all get together at a meeting like this and we decide we should do something about that. And so we protest and we ask, why can't we just use guinea pigs instead? Right? They are, they're gorgeous, they're just as easy to produce and handle, and they don't have any spikes. So that makes everything much easier. So they bring this to the Public Transport Authority or whatever, and they consider this proposal and then say, well, we already mass-produce hedgehogs. Change is expensive and complicated, so no to the guinea pigs. Yeah, so that is kind of where we end up with that. Now, however, says the Public Transport Authority, we do understand that you have an issue and that we're happy to accommodate your quote, unquote, special needs, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take the hedgehogs, and on some of the hedgehogs, we're going to put tiny corks on them. And then we're going to start a hedgehog cork charity where volunteers go to the train stations and the bus stations and do this like every day. And the charity has to reapply for funding every year and all of that jazz. So that's what we're going to do. That's our solution to your problem. Now, you might say that's ridiculous, that would never happen in real life. But of course, it does all the time. Like there, for example. On the left here, we have a train where you have to bring one of those big platforms and get like 1 or 2 staff members to roll it up to the train so that then the train or the platform becomes accessible. Whereas on the right here, we have a train where the accessibility is already built in and it was thought of as the train was designed. Or an example that we might see often in our work is buttons. So on the left here, we have an icon button with an X on it. The screen reader output of that might be either blank button, if it's an actual icon, or if you just put an X in, then it would read out something like X button. And then you don't know if you're going to be redirected to Twitter or if it closes the modal or something. You will never know. And on the right here, we just have like a button, and it just says close button. Yeah, so these two different implementation of solutions to problems, they come from fundamental different understandings of where the problem lies. So do I think that the problem lies with your skin and that it's too thin? Or am I thinking that the issues, that the spikes are the issue? And based on where I put the issue and where I'm looking for the solution, I come up with very, very different implementations. And this is where I'm coming up to the different models of disability. So the way that we have typically thought of disability and how most of society still does is of a medical issue. So that disability is a medical issue. Disability is seen as negative. We don't want to talk or think about it because it makes us uncomfortable. And the focus is on what is, in quotes, wrong with you. And disabled people in this scenario are rarely ever considered, not in design, not in public transport, not in society as a whole. Whereas on the other side, you would have the social model, where disability is neither good nor bad. It's neutral. It's just the difference. And the focus is on removing barriers. So, and disabled people are seen as part of society, like fundamentally. That's the key part. And the social model says that it is not your difference or your impairment that disables you, but it is the barriers in society that make your difference disabling. So, for example, there can be different types of barriers in society. There can be physical barriers and attitudinal barriers. So attitudinal barriers might be to not consider disabled people during your software development process. And that then leads to physical barriers as well, as we will see. There are, like, accessibility issues are so incredibly common, Here are just a few very common accessibility issues. Icon buttons without any ARIA labels, keyboard navigation, as in like the lack thereof, text resizing and responsive design, insufficient color contrast, headings and page structure, animations that don't have additional like media queries for users who prefer reduced motion, ambiguous link texts like click here or the redirect me to Twitter issue. Inputs without any labels is also very common, and images without alt text, as well as time-limited notifications. Now, all of these issues, like none of these are technologically difficult by any means. Like I've been coding for a year, maybe a little bit more, and I can solve all of these. Like not everywhere and so on, but I have solved every single one of these before. Like none of these are technologically difficult by any means. So given that, surely we might think that a lot of websites would not have these very fundamental issues. But we would be, yeah, well, let's see. I know I'm already, obviously, you know, but so WebAIM, they do this review of the top 1 million websites every year. And then they check what percentages of them fail the web content accessibility guidelines, and just the basic ones, like so level A and level AA. And let's see how this has developed over the last 4 years, shall we? So, like, first have a think in your head where you think that is at. Like, is it at 0 or 20% or 60%, or is it perhaps much higher than that? It's really, really, really close to 100%, like really close. Well, let's see, maybe it has improved between 2019 and 2020. Not really. But then the pandemic happened, right? And so we all had a lot of time to fix our accessibility issues. So then it came down. Maybe in the second year of the pandemic, maybe, you know, maybe after a while, right? Yeah, well, and yeah, it continues like that. So the percentages of websites that fail WCAG A and AA are 96.3% with around 50 errors per page. Now, this is a huge number. This is massive. Like, and this is really mad because those issues are really not, like, especially level A, like the most basic one, is not that difficult to achieve. But it's just something that we don't focus on at the moment. And that's a real issue because it does lead to real barriers to people to using your website, to accessing information. And that's from from like attending your GP to being able to participate in like democratic processes, to transport, to like to job applications. There's so many levels of that. Fundamentally, with the code that we write, we decide who gets to participate in society and who does not. And accessibility is about doing the right thing, first and foremost. However, you might say, aside from doing the right thing, what's in it for me? Well, first of all, you can really stand out as a developer when you know even just like the basics or the fundamentals of accessibility. Like considering that 96% of websites aren't accessible, we can guess that the percentage of developers who know how to code accessibly might be somewhat similar. Like I don't have statistics on that, it's just like a guess, let's say like that. It's really great for juniors, where it's just an additional thing that can set you apart. It's also great for seniors because it means that juniors then don't come and annoy you about accessibility issues. So yeah, it really does show that you have something extra to offer. But not just that, there's also the Purple Pound, which is a charity who does research around what the spending power of disabled people and also their entire households is, and how that impacts the amount of money that businesses lose. And they estimate that UK businesses lose every month £1 billion. So that's 9 zeros there behind that, simply by not considering accessibility in their processes. And another thing, aside from doing the right thing, is the European Accessibility Act, which is going to come into place in 2025, I think in like July or something. And that means that any businesses who have customers in the European Union, so not businesses who are in the European Union, but anybody who wants to sell to Europeans, needs to prove that their products and services are accessible, and also needs to do regular audits. So we're going to see a big shift towards that over the next year and a half. And also, you're doing the right thing. Okay, I get it. So where do I start? You already have. Just by attending today, you have started to think about this issue, and hopefully you're going to continue this conversation and bring it into your businesses and just start learning a little bit about this. Really, just start anywhere and then don't stop learning about it, really. Then there's a really great book called, I mean, it's a small book, but it's a book called Giving a Damn About Accessibility, which I have printed out here. So after the talk, if you're an introvert and you don't know how to talk to people, you can just like read a book. I do that all the time. It's really great. Yeah, Giving a Damn About Accessibility, practical handbook for designers. It has better arguments than I do, and it's just really well done. So have a look at that. Also, if you have Firefox installed, then you already have an accessibility testing tool on your computer. Actually, I'm going to show that. That wasn't planned. I go off script. Oh my god. But yeah, so Firefox, if you, this is Firefox. If you right-click, you have your inspect, but then you also have inspect accessibility properties. And that opens this side panel here, where you can then, for example, show the tabbing order, or you can simulate how this website looks for different people with different vision. And you can also check for issues and other stuff like that. It's really cool. Have a look. What else? Let's go back to my slideshow. Yeah, so learn about the Firefox Accessibility Inspector. Learn to navigate by keyboard only. It's not difficult, but it's really important. And then learn how to use a screen reader. You can do that, like at least the fundamentals and like the very basic principles of it, probably in one afternoon. VoiceOver is already included on your Mac. Narrator is already included on your Windows computer. And NVDA is open source and the best of those options. Yeah, and then after that, where next? I quickly created a link of some of the best bookmarks I have and put them on my blog. which is constantly work in progress, so please don't criticize. But yeah, there's a list of really, really good resources from people who've been doing this much, much, much longer than I have, to UK government design systems, to like really good resources, so have a look at that. And that is my very much not 30-minute talk, but now we have lots of time for questions, so yeah, thank you very much.
Cool, that's great. Thank you. One of the things that I think is great is, as web developers, I say this thing after every talk, one of the great things about our jobs is that we can just change things, and we can make the world a very slightly better place just by doing a good job. And one of the things that I think about this is you probably actually don't need to ask anyone just to start doing this. Yeah. Like, if you just do it, no project manager is going to be like, you spent too long on the accessibility issues. Like, you know, like they're not going to do that. So you should just learn it, start doing it, and I think the result is usually a better product overall anyway, because you've put more thought into it.
Well, no, it's also much better for search engine optimization. It's generally a better user experience. So often you have issues with like heading structures that are not well done. And a lot of the time it's just because you didn't think through exactly how you want to structure your content. So by doing that, you kind of force yourself to take that step. But exactly what you said, like I want to code by default accessibly. So if someone asks me to build a button, of course I'm going to interpret that as build an accessible button. Like that's my default. If then someone tells me to break the button or something, then sure, okay. I mean, I get paid for that.
Are you sure
right?
you want it broken?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Are you sure you want me to break this button?
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So does anybody have any questions for Doro about stuff? Okay, we've got a mic at the back, so it's just.
I guess I see we talk about this where I work quite a lot as well, and it's obviously a really important topic. But what I always see it framed as, or certainly in the workplace, is build something, needs to be built right tomorrow, or yesterday, and then we'll fix accessibility, right? So why, and I guess this is a question for you and also to the hive mind of the room, why have we not got a better solution than that? Or not, or is there, does anyone know of, a tool that we can put into our workflow that's going to GitHub Copilot, scan the code as you go, say, you got a button here, you're missing a label?
Yes.
Does it exist? Because if it does, I'd love to know.
So there's lots of tools you can use. You can use the accessibility ESLint package. So it lints and it automatically already flags up, oh, hey, maybe you should put a label onto that input. Then there's AxeCore, where you can write unit tests that check for any issues. You can also, so that's why I'm saying that like, you need to learn how to use a screen reader and how to navigate by keyword. Because when you build any component, like I have that open in a browser and I look at it visually, right? Like if I were to write the code without that, and I would then make a PR, and then my lead would say, oh, but the button didn't show up. Like I would be super embarrassed by that, right? But then why is it different if it doesn't show up for screen readers, right? So that's why I want people to learn how to use the internet in the way that other people do, by keyboard and by screen reader and so on. And as you already develop, already check for these things. And so you do need to learn some of the fundamentals on that, but it doesn't work if you only figure things out in test, right? Like if you build something and then you merge it and then you only later find out that something's broken, then you missed a step in the development process somewhere, right? So yeah, but there are also automated tools that that do flag a lot of the issues up, but they never flag up everything. I think automated tools can flag up something like 20% of accessibility issues. So manual testing is always required.
I was just struck by the huge figure, obviously like 90-odd%. And I was thinking, from what you've been digging into this recently, and it doesn't feel like something that people are actively against. It seems like it's apathy, it's ignorance, it's just not, they're not thinking of it. They think to build it quickly means building it one way and not another way, whatever. Have you encountered much actual pushback? People who are like, we don't have time for that, or we shouldn't do this, or here's reasons why we don't. Because 96 seems like a lot for it all to be pure ignorance and pure just clearly just not thinking of it.
So I haven't seen, so I'm currently on an open source project where I kind of, like, I joined the project a little bit late and then as, hey, can you find a way to make this UI more accessible? And so I've been on this project since then, and we have made massive improvements. But the thing that I find is that I learn something, I then fix it, and then while I do that, someone else merges like 3 other things in, which are not yet accessible. So then I have to, oh guys, by the way, and then I teach people, oh, also, hey, here's how to use a screen reader, and here's how we do these things. And so over time, that team that I've been working on, we've all skilled up massively on accessibility. But the default and the habits are still, well, we don't really want to put an ID on these things because we don't really want to pass more props. So like we can find another way to label that. And like those are a lot of the things that I think are just habits, or maybe one way of doing it. And like different people have ideas about what neat code looks like. And I don't know, it's like, I think it's a lot of bad habits essentially. And I think one of the key issues is that we don't teach accessibility in our computer science programs or in our coding bootcamps, or even in a lot of UX courses, it's not included as like a default. Like by now, hopefully most do. I think it's a cultural issue essentially.
So the issue is more that it's an add-on
instead
of part of the process.
Yeah, it needs to be considered from the beginning, but it rarely ever is. It's a cultural shift that needs to happen.
I just want to add to this, like my turning point for me was to see actually a blind person trying to use something we built using a screen reader. Just seeing that like in front of you, then you realize, you know, what you're doing. You're causing pain for people for no reason, and that's like then yeah, like that apathy part. Like you know, this is a real someone that you saw in front of you that changes the attitude. So yeah, that could help.
Yeah.
Shame-driven development. So, yeah.
And I mean, like even if we do try to emulate some of these things, like by using a screen reader ourselves or something, that's not the same thing as usability testing with disabled people who do this every day. Like they use screen readers very differently and much better, and so fast as well. But yeah, it's when you notice all of the issues that come up and all of the barriers and blocks that are there, it really makes you think. Yeah.
I don't know. It's less of a question, more of a just talking about accessibility. Some of the things that you popped up in there about array labels and stuff, I would highly suggest people look at a tool, a new browser called Polypane. I can't remember the guy's full name, it's Killing something or other. But it's a new browser that essentially lets you see things live on the page itself. So like the array label's missing, it will try and engage you in terms of accessibility and stuff. And I think it's just a great tool. I've only used it as a trial, but it's a little bit expensive to pay for by yourself. But if you can get your employers or whatever to buy into it, it's definitely something to worth looking at investing in, 100%.
And is that a testing? Is that like a plugin or something?
Yeah, it's a new browser. So it's an actual browser you can download like Chrome
okay.
or Firefox.
Because yeah, I think I put a couple of there's a few free browser plugins and so on that I have in my list. I have like 5 different ones because every single one does something slightly better or slightly worse. So you check with different ones, but. Yeah.
Well, this one's kind of like a mashup of everything, right?
Yeah.
So like you can go, you can see all the visual accessibility tools, for example. You know, you can look through them all, that kind of thing. In addition to that, as I see, array labels, if there's things missing, it will try and guide you. It will give you errors. If you're looking at things like your breakpoints and splitting across different, breakpoints between mobile and tablet and desktop, it will have its own, like, you know, the first paint of this page was X milliseconds, and here's the sort of things that you could do better with it in terms of accessibility and stuff. You know, how to disable images and stuff for it, for example. There's a lot of great Polypane. I've put the link on Discord in the general chat, but it's a great tool. It's a little bit laggy, but only because it's trying to do so much of these things on the fly for you. But yeah, it ties straight in with the accessibility thing, and it would probably make, for a developer, for the trial that I used it for, it definitely does highlight a lot of the accessibility issues.
Cool.
Question somewhere at the back? Yeah, cheers.
Hiya. Hello. Oh. Do you have any?
That's for the live stream.
It's fine. Do you have any recommendations for tools for like colorblind? Because I'm currently just asking the one guy on my team who's colorblind, which therefore excludes other different types of colorblindness.
So I can use. I can't fully hear.
Colorblindness, any tool recommendations for?
Recommendations for color blindness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So The Firefox Accessibility Inspector has it shows you you can inspect elements to check the color contrast. So that way you can see if it passes WCAG A or AA, and just like what the ratio is. And it also has a few simulators. Yeah, for different types of color blindness that you can select from to look at for you what that looks like. Yeah, that's kind of mine. I have a blog post as well on like a couple of tools of how you can find like the closest match for a color that matches the better color contrast and things like that. Yeah. Does that help?
Hello. I saw online, so obviously there's lots of websites that have those very expensive accessibility like things in the bottom right corner
The overlays,
that you can
yeah.
use. But I remember seeing recently that there was like studies done on those and that they're not actually effective.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any thoughts or if you've looked into that at all and if you want to talk about it, because I don't know much about it.
Sure. Well, what I know about it is that that a lot of accessibility specialists have very strong opinions about these, and when they then mention them, they get sued by those overlay companies. And so there's like a whole website, overlay fact sheets, where I think about like 500 people have signed, basically saying like overlays make things more more inaccessible than accessible, or they create different issues and so on. They're a bit like trying to put tiny corks into a hedgehog, right? It's like it's the easy fix that like we don't actually have to fix our website. We're just gonna slap an overlay on top of it and then hope that things work. And now, yeah, that's kind of what a lot of people think about that. I haven't looked too much into overlays myself. Just I have read a lot of the different overlay companies that sue accessibility advocates. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Doro.
Cool. All right, thank you so much.
Yeah. Cool. So we'll be back in a month's time. Check the meetup group. I'll hit the notification. It always tends to sell out because we've got a limited place here. So if you want to come next time, you know, RSVP as soon as you can. Next Tuesday, Edinburgh JS. Please do come along to that. That'll be a really great talk. Hit the suggestion board outside. I really want to know what is that you want from these meetups. So if it's a certain topic or a kind of focus on something that you want to know about, yeah, just stick an idea up there. Really appreciate it, guys. Thank you for coming along. See you next time.